what if he also takes some time to really exact vengeance on Tyrael, who he considers to be a traitor? You know, this is the angel that ripped off his wings and joined the mortals. And so it just seemed natural that Imperius would take a moment to really relish in Tyrael's demise.
Is Tyrael already dead by the events of Diablo 4? Have Blizzard left secret clues to this peppered throughout the Diablo 4 media and trailers?
Hell is coming, brother.
And if they did decide to kill him, who would have done the dark deed and why?
Why?
To ask and answer these questions, let's look at all the evidence together as to why I believe that the Archangel Tyrael is dead by the events of Diablo 4.
One of the challenges that we had to deal with was, why doesn't Imperius just kill Tyrael? You know, that was a question that just kind of kept popping up.
It's important to mention that, like, since the events of Diablo 3, like, heaven closed its gates, phones off the hook, they're not taking our calls, right? Like, nobody's answering. Haradrim are incommunicado.
We're kind of screwed,
we're kind of on our own.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's not great.
We know that it is confirmed by the developers during the BlizzCon lore panel that heaven closed its gates by Diablo 4. And while I have an entire video positing theories on why I believe this has occurred, the evidence and the strongest theory is because Tyrael, now immortal, has perished, leaving heaven without justice or wisdom. But how can that be? As the developers also confirmed, Tyrael is in heaven, which contradicts Tyrael's own promise. See, if there's anything that seems immutable, it is the promise of an angel, especially one who is the biggest advocate of humanity. Even the Angelus Council, led by a wrathful Imperius, all but turned their back on humanity, except Tyrael. It was Tyrael who remained a staunch advocate of humanity and sanctuary, aiding them by creating the Haradrim, as well as defying a pact between heaven and hell, intervening secretly on several occasions throughout the series to keep the forces of hell at bay.
Forevermore, we shall stand together, angels and men, in the light of this glorious new dawn.
He can't kill Tyrael. We need Tyrael in the story. Tyrael's a very important character in the universe.
It was something that we just danced with for a long time.
Brother, why?
If we look at the last time that we saw Tyrael in the storyline of Reaper of Souls in his cinematic, he didn't turn to the angels for help when the Black Soulstone was in danger. Instead, he opted to sacrifice himself, or believe he was going to die, to allow Loreth Na, his companion in the Haradrim, to escape and get the aid of the Nephilim.
Tyrael's role in the cinematic was challenging because we wanted him to be himself. We wanted him to be heroic, but we had to acknowledge the reality that he is a mortal facing angels, and that's where the idea of saving one of his guys emerged.
He sends him to find the player character.
Go! Find the Nephilim!
And the unspoken part of that line is, while I stay here and die so that you can get away to alert the Nephilim.
In fact, the very last words Tyrael speaks in Reaper of Souls' story are ominous, to say the least.
That day, will he have the strength to resist? Or will he be our doom?
And we'll circle back to what perhaps prophetic words of Nephilim potentially being his own doom would be. However, what should be of note outside of Imperius, the aspect of wrath, listening to Tyrael admit that the Nephilim have become so powerful they may turn to the side of darkness and destroy everything, which I can't see Imperius sitting on the sidelines for. Instead, this may tie back to Imperius's Wrath arc. As seen in my latest video covering Imperius's Wrath arc not being complete, the developers had nearly all but killed Tyrael and only decided in the last second to spare him, as it didn't make sense that Imperius wouldn't go through with it and kill him outright.
Imperius basically called Tyrael out for what he considered his foolishness.
You sacrificed everything to be one of them. Was it worth it?
And then he proceeded to slay every single guard in the room and beat the heck out of Tyrael for a bit.
Now, like Andariel being cut from Diablo 1 or Iswal the Angel, this seems to be a cut storyline that could be moved forward. But according to the developers, Tyrael was too important a character. However, while that may be in Diablo 3 after the loss of Deckard Cain, the storyteller and guide for humanity, it doesn't quite follow the rules of Diablo.
This is the franchise where even after you kill the Lord of Terror himself, it's not good enough and you need to risk your own mortal soul to try to contain him and just fend evil off for one more day.
Diablo 4 is looking to herald back to the older games, to quote-unquote embrace the darkness. And it doesn't seem we need Tyrael anymore. As we've seen already in the first gameplay trailer, that we have a new narrator, who I will break down his possible identity and ties to Tyrael. It looks like everyone's favorite mortal angel may be on the chopping block.
We did want to almost kill Tyrael or make him to the point where he was almost dead. And most of the cinematics or the storyboards at that point contained an enormous amount of blood that was going to be included in the cinematic. He was going to be bleeding, possibly from his nose or even his mouth or other parts of scrapes or cuts on his skin. We need to make that not only look as realistic as possible, but also blend into the performance that we were trying to get from the character.
And with heaven having closed their gates, there's no one to answer our prayers. Even the Horadrim are but mad old men talking to themselves, talking to graves, clutching their bottles as hard as they once clutched their swords.
Which brings us to the theory, is the man at the grave Lorath Nah? The only two remaining characters, bar the Nephilim heroes, are Tyrael and his new Horadrim sidekick, Lorath Nah, become Reaper of Souls.
You chose the perfect time to reform the Horadrim, Tyrael. Our troubles never cease, do they?
It would seem not.
In the Diablo 4 trailer, we see a man by an unknown grave reminiscing about the terrors that Lilith's forces have wrought. There are, however, direct clues that this man is indeed a member of the newly formed Horadrim and possibly Lorath Nah. The first clue that hits you over the head at the beginning of the trailer is the fact the man is wearing a Horadrim necklace, and the Horadrim, or new Horadrim, were only added last minute to aid Tyrael for Reaper of Souls, and to guard the Black Soulstone.
Then the idea of them becoming Horadrim emerged.
This was an order of human warrior mages that Tyrael created long ago to help him do things on Sanctuary, like hunt down the primevals and all of this.
Lorath Nah is the only member of note that we interact with during Reaper of Souls, and we never see his face. As far as the grave and its clues, we know two things. One, it's probably not Deckard Cain's grave, as he'd already perished in Diablo 3, and he was burned via pyre. It's probably also not the hero of Diablo 3, as the man refers to the unknown deceased in the grave as brother. And I dare say Blizzard's not going to pigeonhole itself with the deceased character is either sex, as both genders were an option in Diablo 3. I am going to say they would hold some ambiguity in the lore, as drilling down on one of the classes or genders seems to take away from the others, potentially. Also, Tyrael controversially gave up his divinity and wings in Diablo 3, becoming mortal. And although he ascends to the rank of Archangel of Wisdom, it seems that would not excuse him from perishing as any other mortal would. And although the developers went out of their way to confirm he is in heaven, that is where his essence, which is still angelic, would reform, and then they could make a new angel if he died. So technically, they could Obi-Wan moment and say we were telling the truth, he was in heaven, but it wasn't his mortal body. Now, what also lends credence to this theory is that heaven is only powerful when in harmony. As Tyrael became the aspect of wisdom, if he died, heaven would be down two aspects, wisdom and presumably justice, and that would force them to close their gates as they'd already suffered heavy losses, as the developers had said. Imperius, although probably somewhat would mourn his brother, even if he perished at his own hands, would have to, through Lightsong, where angels sing, reform two new angels, one of wisdom, one of justice, but also two new angels that probably didn't love humanity like Tyrael did.
People were, a little taken aback that we had written into the plot that he had kind of sacrificed his power on behalf of mankind, and that he would literally become immortal and take on mortal flesh and failings and weaknesses to better identify with them. But I like the idea that we finally had a heroic character that wasn't necessarily the hardest hitting guy in the neighborhood and was willing to provide that kind of personal sacrifice in order to help the player characters win, and defeat evil.
The dream continues to haunt me, old friend. It always starts with a journey to a distant land.
So what clues do we have outside of the tenuous ties to his sidekick, Lorith Nah, at his grave? If you believe that Blizzard doesn't add any detail by accident, as I do, the biggest potential piece of evidence is actually the cloth that is draped over the grave and seen for a brief moment. But why is that of any import? Why cloth on a grave? What would that signify? The answer, unsurprisingly, is actually Tyrael. The strongest tie to humanity Tyrael had throughout the franchise was actually simple cloth. The original design of Tyrael saw him have a paltry piece of white cloth draped over the center of his angelic armor. When he forsook his divinity and landed in Yuan's sanctuary in the guise of the stranger, he had all but worn a green monk-like robe. However, when reunited with his sword, Eldruin, and reclaiming some of his former glory, armor was reintegrated back in with his robe. This earthy addition to his outfit was to signify his mortality, and most importantly, his now material cape was what remained in the place of his wings. As if to signify now he's bound to the material plane by plain material. Outside of something as gaudy as his Sword of Justice, Eldruin leaning on the grave, it's easy to see why a subtle homage being a remnant of his tattered cape would make sense and be a wry enough nod that Blizzard was giving away the occupant of the grave's identity, but in the most subtle yet meaningful of ways.
He can't kill Tyrael. We need Tyrael in the story. Tyrael's a very important character in the universe.
It was something that we just danced with for a long time.
Brother. Why?
So the question then remains, if Tyrael is deceased come Diablo 4, who in fact had killed him? The most likely culprit, unfortunately, is Imperius. It was originally written in Reaper of Souls Imperius was the big bad guy turning to wrath. It was he who called for a vote against Sanctuary again after Diablo 3 in the novel Storm of Light, and it was Tyrael again who saved his precious humanity. All roads for Imperius to return to his quote-unquote status quo of the eternal conflict are blocked by Tyrael, who he sees as a mortal abomination. With the last time we see the two together, the Nephilim just defeating Malthael, it's possible, however, that the Nephilim at some time would turn on Tyrael. However, as unlikely, his very last words would predict this.
We have the strength to resist, or will he be our doom?
Now, the only way I can see them killing Tyrael literally is A, by accident if Imperius lunged at them, or B, if like Uldyssian, the most powerful Nephilim on record, they went supernova, which the clip looks like they're actually becoming more than anything, like they could rip through time and space itself, and that's why Uldyssian sacrificed himself. The Nephilim perishing and taking Tyrael with them would be more tragic, as all he had labored for was to aid humanity, and it was they who he had championed who killed him. Most likely, however, Tyrael would have perished at the hands of demons, if not Imperius himself. Now, there is some recurring symbology tied to Tyrael that is actually peppered throughout media we've seen in Diablo 4. In the art of Diablo, Tyrael's official symbol looks like this, which is a summoning symbol we see for Lilith. Now, the potentially bad part of this for Tyrael, obviously, is that the symbol is shown on the summoning pillar in the opening cinematic, and more are seen in the Diablo 4 released artwork, though they are configured differently. Now, this could very well be his symbol in the many hieroglyphs, perhaps outlining the stories of the heavens forces versus hell. However, Diablo 4 is confirmed to center around blood and sacrifice. Now, what better a sacrifice than the blood of an angel? Perhaps to summon a primeval, the blood of an angel is required. Perhaps there's another unknown prophecy at play. But as with everything we've speculated on, only time will tell. But what do you think? Do you believe Tyrael has perished in Diablo 4, leaving Sanctuary in the heavens without wisdom or justice respectively? Let me know in the comments below. Please make sure to smash the like button and subscribe. Plus, hit the notifications bell. It helps the channel out immeasurably. Also, we have a Discord for anyone wanting to party up in Diablo 4 with over 380 members to date. Thanks for watching, and until next time, Traveler.
Tyrael throws out a line, "I do not fear death. And Imperius says something to the effect of, well, we'll see.